Hello, today is Wednesday, June 25th. Welcome to episode 469 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI's Deputy Executive Director, Martha Miller, and I'm joined today by NSI Advisory Board Member Lester Munson and NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vinia. Today, NATO has shattered a precedent. In The Hague, alliance leaders agreed to a historic leap in defense spending, pledging 5% of GDP, a direct response to mounting threats from Russia and unrelenting pressure from President Trump. This isn't just a policy tweak, it's a seismic shift in the West's security posture. This redraws the map of transatlantic defense, with Russia's war in Ukraine grinding on and the specter of potential wider conflict in the Middle East. NATO's new commitment signals a hard pivot from decades of post-Cold War complacency to all-out deterrence. And at the center is President Trump, who is asking more from Europe and also demurring from a full-throated guarantee of U.S. protection. For the U.S., this is more than just dollars or diplomatic posturing. It's about whether Washington can count on its allies to share the burden as great power rivalry heats up. Lester Munson, I want to start with you. Asked whether the U.S. remains committed to Article 5. Trump told reporters, depends on your definition. There are numerous definitions of Article 5. You know that, right? But I'm committed to being their friends. So what did Trump mean by this?
Well, I think he used the wrong word. I think he meant interpretations, not definitions. Mm-hmm. So, and there are, in fact, multiple interpretations of Article 5. Article 5 says that the signers of the North Atlantic Treaty will help each other in times of conflict, subject to their constitutional processes. In other words, there's a little flex in the system. There is no doubt about that. And each country gets to make a decision as to whether or not it will intervene to help other countries. That is not a Trump invention. That is built into the NATO charter. So he's telling us something that we already know, but everyone is kind of laying on top of what he said, and he knows this is going to happen. Their interpretation of his willingness to come to the aid of NATO. Now, so at the end of the day, I'm not super worried about what he said. In fact, it's all true. Look at what the actual impact is. NATO countries are now talking about it, at least talking about, we'll see what they actually do, increasing their defense spending. That is terrific for the alliance. It is not bad for the alliance. It is good for the alliance. And so I hate to sound like the Trump cheerleader here, but this is exactly what we need. We should be browbeating the hell out of our European allies in particular, and Canada, to do more defense spending for Europe. Frankly, it would be great if they all got up to 5%, because then maybe we'll get up to 5%. Right now, we're in like the mid 3%. So I'm strongly in favor of this approach. I think people are just kind of looking to take shots on this interpretation of Article 5 thing, and it's kind of dumb because it's actually a very good thing.
So, Morgan, this is kind of a week of deterrence, it seems. What message does this increase to 5%? What does that send to our adversaries and like Russia and China, but Russia in particular?
Yeah, so I'm just going to pile on first as to what Trump said. Trump is just totally playing his critics here, and I kind of love it in a way, because it's just too easy, right? I think when Trump says that there are multiple definitions or interpretations of Article 5, for what it's worth, he's actually listening to his advisors here. I guarantee you, his advisors have told him, well, yeah, there's this definition, or here, he's actually listened to his advisors here on how Article 5 can or cannot be interpreted. Because I guarantee you, before becoming president, he didn't know what the hell Article 5 was. Also, I would note that, Matthew Whitaker has sort of, bolstered the U.S. presence in NATO and engagement. So I just don't think that the United States is going anywhere when it comes to NATO. His critics can say, oh, he's just so wishy-washy, we can't count on the United States. I think that's kind of BS at this point. And I think it's humorous as to sort of how Trump is just, schooling them. when you talk about deterrence,
Mhm.
look, you go back to 2006 here, and it was, there was this commitment among NATO allies of a 2% of GDP for defense. And now we are ramping that up to 5%. Keep in mind, a lot of member states couldn't even meet that 2% benchmark right now. Now that we're going up to 5%, I mean, I think you've got Poland and Estonia who are actually quite close to meeting that. I think they realize the threat of the Russian bear next door. And I think it is important to note, too, that a lot of states have a long way to go. And this is really signaling that they need to get their butt in gear. I mean, not only do they need to pay about, I guess, 3.5% for that sort of core defense, but they have to up to 1.5% in cyber and intel. That's sort of part of the 5% piece here. But in addition to that, you've got a lot of countries that need to ramp up production. The fact that Russia is continuing to invade their next door neighbor in Ukraine and continue to produce weapons, I think really sends a signal to NATO member states that they need to get their butts in gear here. And not only do they need to increase their defense budgets, but they also need to take a look at their defense production industry. I also think, I'm not going to let this conversation slide without a mention of the Iran conflict. I believe it was Clausewitz who said that war is thus an act of force to compel our enemy to do our will. And that is exactly what happened here this past week. I think we saw that NATO Secretary General Rutte was very complimentary of President Trump. I think most of NATO allies recognize the good work that the United States has done and appreciate it. I mean, they sure as hell wouldn't have done it themselves. And so I think that the fact that we eliminated Iran's nuclear facilities really does send a message, to the extent that that program has been quote unquote obliterated or set back. I think it's too soon to tell. That assessment is still being carried out. I think it's important to mention in this leaked report. I mean, doesn't really tell us a whole lot, to be frank. So I wouldn't put too much stock in that. But with that said, I do also think that it's funny, going back to sort of NATO, that you have Putin here coming to President Trump and saying, "Oh, hey, do you need help with Iran?" It's like, no, I don't need help with Iran. I need help with you. And so, if anything, that should really give confidence to NATO allies that Trump has lost patience with Putin, and that I think he's on the right track. But of course, we'll have to see what those conversations with Zelensky look like at The Hague.
And let me just throw one other thing on the pile. I agree with with Morgan's take on Iran. Watch Trump embrace Erdogan in the photo. That was entirely on purpose. There's that there are going to be consequences. There's going to be follow-on action there from the big hug of Erdogan. That was pretty notable as well.
Yeah, Les, can I ask you? Do you think that was a hug of "we're going to talk later," or a "hey, bro"? Like what kind of?
Yeah, what do you mean to the follow-on?
Yeah, I think so. There's going to be a lot of conversations happening there in the Eastern Mediterranean and in Southeastern Europe over what that was, what that meant. If I were the Brits and the Germans and the French watching that, I'd be like, oh, that was fairly instructive. Like, he goes to the guy that we all kind of shun and embraces him right here on the stage while we're taking pictures. It's just going to produce a lot of conversations in this kind of post-Iran strike environment.
Yeah, well, for what it's worth, if Trump takes him out to the woodshed later, I wouldn't be sad about it.
And that's
possible. I don't think that's going to happen more.
No, I don't think it's going to happen either. I think there needs to be some tough conversations, and I thought that's for another pod.
Maybe.
Well, as we know, anything is possible. One day can shift quickly to the next. But on that note, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for Kelly Crowley, Taylor Ling, Claude Jennings, and NSI staff for helping producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, June 27th for another episode. We are also on YouTube, so please check us out. And if you like what you've seen or heard, rate, review, and subscribe.